Hello, everyone. Kristen Ratan. Doug, can you hear me? Yeah. All right, good. Thanks. Okay, so Collaborative Knowledge Foundation, otherwise known as COCO for short. Adam Hyde, who's in the back there, and I founded in October of 2015. And we're building open source tools to transform research communication. I'm going to talk mostly about where I think the platform is going, and I'll introduce a little bit about COCO at the end. So I've been in the industry for 20-ish years, and I would say that we've committed some of the worst crimes in platform building and in the publishing industry. As we moved from print to online, we ported over a lot of our workflows. We asked the technology essentially to continue to treat print as the version of record for a long time, which was for good reason, but it's left us with a lot of legacy issues and silos in the way in which we approach technology. And a lot of other industries have moved forward much more quickly in terms of how they use technology to transform their businesses. We've embraced standards in the industry because we knew the importance of the content that we were working with required a certain level of integrity in how it was treated by technology, and that again, for very good reasons, but we haven't always believed in our own standards and followed them. So we create rigid standards, and then we sort of are kind of loosey-goosey in terms of how we apply them. And so it's created a lot of disjointed sort of both workflow, service, and platform issues that right now is costing us a lot. It's creating delays in terms of how quickly research is getting out to the public. There's a lot of concern about that. And in addition, I think it's created a real barrier to innovation. And some of my fellow panelists are building really amazing things, and there's a real challenge getting a foothold with the way that we're currently using technology. So I'm going to talk about two different ways in which I think things are changing. One is the rise of open source, and the other is the construct of the platform itself as decoupled as opposed to monolithic. So I'll start with open source. In this industry, I have worked for many companies that provide proprietary software solutions, and that's a fine thing. It's the road we know, and there's typically a vendor associated with a platform, and they provide a lot of comfort through SLAs and KPIs and service offerings that include people that we know and that we can call and that are on the other end of the phone and are able to answer a lot of questions for us. But one of the challenges with that is that it's created a one-to-one relationship between the service and the platform. Which means that service providers tend to only be able to offer services on the platform, on the technology they've built, limiting their ability perhaps to be as nimble as they might be otherwise. And the platforms are only being used by one service provider. And so if you were to actually open that up and rethink that and create a many-to-many relationship between service providers and technology solutions, you might find there would be a lot more interesting sort of competitive remixing of technologies to offer new service offerings, lower cost, faster, et cetera. And so with open source, you have that opportunity. And while it's a road we're just paving now, it's really fascinating, because if you think about the possibility of there being many different open source technologies, service providers being able to sort of agilely pull together pieces of those and recreate and remix platform offerings, then you can imagine us really accelerating in terms of what we're able to do with our platform technologies in the industry. And it also changes the nature of competition. Right now we think of platforms as we're either using this or we're using that, and we have to make a choice. But if service providers, many of whom are in this room, many of whom I've worked for, were able to really nimbly pull together different open source solutions and recreate and reinvent their platforms on an ongoing basis, they perhaps would be able to innovate very quickly and lower the cost. And also it opens up the opportunity for new service providers to enter the market, as well as new tool builders to build open source tools. So open source is an interesting concept because of that, and I think we have a sort of either-or sense of open source in this industry. We think, oh, if I use open source, I can't have a commercial business with that, or I can't rely on it because there's no service provider. But in fact, other industries have really embraced this. So OpenStack is, I'm going to go through this in great, no, I'm not going to go through this in great detail. I'm just going to tell you what OpenStack is, which was an open source alternative to Amazon's web services, which is the biggest cloud hosting tool out there, technology out there. And a group of people got together and said, we want an open source alternative because we don't want to rely on Amazon. We're competing with Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the biggest tech giants in the world use OpenStack now. And it is the largest, I believe, open source project in the world. It's being used by finance and media and the automotive industry and the telecom industry. And so most of the largest tech industries rely on OpenStack as a foundational technology. And what they've realized is that we can rely on these same foundations, an open shared foundation upon which all of our companies sit, and still compete with each other head to head on the services we provide on that. And we can make a fortune doing it because we've lowered the cost of the infrastructure and we're able to actually all leverage common infrastructure. They've realized technology, in part, a lot of technology, really should just be public utilities that we're using, that we're all sharing. And why reinvent the same foundational technologies over and over again when we all need the same things? We all need access control, or we all need some form of a database here, and we all need some form of an API there. So it's really transformed these industries, and many of the largest companies that we all know, AT&T and IBM, et cetera, are all using this common shared infrastructure. And I use this example because I think we can learn from it in our industry. We've created silos that are very deep, that go all the way from the bottom of the stack to the top, when in fact we could be thinking about competing with each other just at the brand level or at the service level and actually sharing all of the infrastructure below, just like all these other industries are doing. And I think what's interesting about it is you've got people who compete with each other but actually collaborate on the other side. So they're competing over here, but a whole group of them are collaborating over there on building the technology, coming up with a common roadmap. They talk to each other about what feature sets they want to see built into this large technology infrastructure. They decide together on what their priorities are, and they also have created a sustainability model and a governance model that keeps this alive and will keep it alive for as long as they need it. And and this is across multiple industries. So it's doable. It's completely doable within our much smaller industry of scholarly communication. So I sort of challenge you to think about how we could do that in our industry. How could we create shared infrastructure? What would we say are the public utilities in research communication versus what is the special sauce that specific service providers or specific publishers would want to keep proprietary? And I think there's a lot. I think we can go very deep into the infrastructure and share it and have a very thin layer of that kind of uniqueness at the top and still have a lot of differentiation across publishers, across journals, across books, et cetera. So that's the sort of open source story. The other story I want to talk about with regard to the way platforms are changing is the concept of the monolithic platform versus decoupled. And it took me a while to wrap my head around this, having grown up in the universe of monolithic platforms. So, I spent most of my career thinking about platforms as a very large, big box. And this big box was very valuable. It took a long time to build. There was a point at which it was done, and it was packaged and delivered to its market, and the market then used that big box. And the market chose between this big box and that big box, and that was the way it was. And once you were in the box, you didn't really want to leave the box. You wanted to stay in the box. It was hard to go to another box. And there really isn't any reason to think about technology that way today, because there really is never going to be one big box that works for everybody all the time and that works for you for more than, say, 5 seconds. Technology changes very, very quickly today. So we need to actually build platforms that are meant to change. We need to build with that concept baked in internally. And so what a lot of platform providers, Cocoa is one, but WordPress, Drupal, a lot of certainly content-driven platforms are doing is something called decoupling their architecture. And what that means is that there are certain core functions, back-end functions that stay within the back end, and the way we're building is with a whole series of smaller components, each one of which is a standalone entity. And what this means, and they all tie together through APIs, what this means is you can swap in and out different components. You can remix those components and create new platforms. They're like Lego blocks that you can build on top of a sort of strong foundation. And so we're building a lot of these pieces and components today, and we have assembled them together initially to create an ebook production platform called Editoria, which we've been working on in conjunction with the University of California Press and California Digital Library. It's all open source. Download it, use it, it's great. But the point being that that's sort of not the be-all and end-all. We know we can remix again to create journals platforms or preprint platforms or other forms of content delivery platforms. And what this also means is that other people can build a lot of these components, that it doesn't begin and end with any one tool builder or any one provider. And it's not our goal as a mission-driven nonprofit to be the one platform to rule them all. It's our goal to actually seed an entire ecosystem of open source components and tools and things that people can build and swap in and out. And we want to be just one among many in that new ecosystem, because that's the way we will achieve true flexibility, versatility, and we'll be able to continue to evolve as the market needs us to evolve. So I think that as we think about ways that, for example, many of the people on this panel can work together, it's really in figuring out who's building what when, making sure our code is really reusable, and that other people can build into whatever ecosystem that or framework that we're providing. I feel like we should have a drinking game, and every time someone says framework or open source or something, it's too early, I guess, but the buzzword drinking game. So anyway, this remixing concept can be used for lots of different environments. It could be used for QA and production. It could be used for content conversion. You could just take one component and stick it to the back end and create a mini platform that has a very specific purpose. So in this way, again, we're rethinking the way in which we compete in the technology industry, because there's no longer one thing to choose. Anybody who's already got a platform can take a component or take a piece and incorporate it and say, this is augmenting what I'm building. Now I don't have to build that one thing. And people have been doing this with open source technologies forever, but a lot of technologies aren't built for this purpose. They aren't built with this kind of mix and match in mind. And so what I'm sort of suggesting now for the various tool builders in the room, that we're all talking to each other about creating technology so that it can be repurposed and be reused by others. And it's great because it's sort of, you relinquish a little control over what you're building, you offer it up to the world as a component. Somebody may only take that one piece, they may rebrand it, repackage it, and no one knows it's inside their offering, but that's still a good thing. That actually is success. So it's a different way of thinking, and that's sort of the COCO way of thinking. So I will leave us with that thought, and we can move on to the next.